Hi, my name is Kat Summers. I'm a freshman at UW. I plan to study community environment and planning with a minor in digital arts and experimental media. And today, for my extra credit project, I'll be talking about Richard Florida and the creative class. To begin, I'll be talking about Florida's early life and education. He had a pretty normal upbringing. He was born in 1957 in Newark, New Jersey. And later in his childhood, he moved to North Arlington, New Jersey for a more suburban experience that his family was looking for. He attended a Catholic high school, but he still claims that he went to Newark every so often to experience city life because his grandparents were Italian, so he used to have family dinners there every Sunday. In 1979, he attended Rutgers College, got his degree in political science, followed by going to Columbia in the mid to late 80s to get a master's and a PhD in urban planning. So he is an urban theorist and an economist and kind of finds a way to intertwine the two, which I really like. Secondly, his career path begins with teaching. Currently he holds a place as the university professor and director of cities at the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto. He moves between Toronto and Miami as well. He's been a visiting professor at many other prestigious institutions. He was a distinguished fellow at NYU, visiting fellow at FIU, and you can see on the side some other schools that he taught at. Additionally, he kind of started his career through journalism and writing. He was involved with The Atlantic for a while. He was the founder of the City Lab blog, which has a lot of urban theory and urban development planning articles, different takes on all of that. What made him famous was books. He wrote The Rise of the Creative Class in 2002, which was his most famous book, followed by Cities in the Creative Class and The Flight of the Creative Class. And recently he's kind of come out with Who's Your City and the New Urban Crisis to follow up on some of the questions he received after writing the first couple books. Lastly, he does have a streak of entrepreneurship. He recently founded the Creative Class Group after his views of the creative class. It's a global advisory firm which is dedicated to kind of helping businesses or organizations manage change, mitigate risk, resolve all types of disputes, and he works with companies such as Audi, Zappos, Microsoft, all of that. So next up, what is the creative class? It was kind of really cool finding this out, but what I did, my overall definition, I guess, would be concentrations of technology workers, artists, musicians, lesbians and gay men, service industry, entrepreneurs, etc. It kind of breaks society down into occupational categories such as science and engineering, arts and culture, business and management, meds and eds, and it's a group that Florida describes as high bohemians. A lot of people wonder how it differs from just normal human capital or just the normal class or an otherwise normal definition of the creative class, and he says it differs because it allows adults without college degrees to fall into the creative class category. There's a quote here that says, roughly 3/4 of college grads in America work in creative class jobs, but 4 in 10 members of the creative class, which amounts to about 16.6 million workers, do not have college degrees, which is one of his statistics that he uses. And basically, it's just a better indicator for levels of human capital than average education levels, and you're kind of including more people who think outside of the box and don't just follow their normal path of going to college. So it's kind of just like an alternative measure of just tracking the society. And now we're moving on to The Rise of the Creative Class, which is the book that basically brought Florida all of his fame and brought him into the light of economic theory and stuff like that. And it explains how his idea of the creative class can benefit a city and how it leads to a more fruitful city, more diverse, more accepting. And it's a shift away from manufacturing economies and kind of the industrialization mindset that the U.S. was going through, and into a post-industrial mindset where all the drivers of economic development are creative professionals. So all of the people driving the new businesses, startups, things like that are all kind of in a creative threshold under his definition, as I explained earlier. So basically, at large, it's the idea that cities should be investing and attracting creative professionals and industries, and then after that, economic growth will follow, is what he's trying to prove. And examples of this are seen all over the place recently, including New York, Austin, even in Seattle. People are moving there for jobs, but also just to be around concerts, around culture, the history of the city, music scene. Like, people are moving to cities to experience the city as a whole, not just for their jobs. And in that comes a lot of creative aspects. Next is, how is it measured? There's an interview that Florida does with Stephen Colbert where he talks about the Bohemian Gay Index, and it's basically an entire set of data he did where he measured changes in income and property value, and basically claimed that artistic, bohemian, and gay populations increase housing values in neighborhoods and communities that they inhabit. And that is due to the tolerance premium, which is basically saying that the more nurtured, the more open-minded, the more creative-led communities that we have are going to lead to more startups like Google and YouTube and even Depop and all of these different things that are bringing our communities together and therefore growing economic development. So that's his view on that, and that's kind of how he measured it. What inspired his ideals? Certainly his urban planning degrees from Columbia. He was attending in the mid to late 1980s and also studying Pittsburgh before that when he was teaching, or after that when he was teaching at Carnegie Mellon. New York in the 1980s was going through a lot of activism, including just coming out of a period where Jane Jacobs was taking over, who's also an amazing urban developer and urban activist who was just like promoting the character of New York City, which I'm sure that he became a part of. As I said, he had early life in the city experience growing up in Newark. There was a 2002 dot-com boom, which was basically a stock market bubble which caused a lot of speculation in internet-related companies in the 1990s, which therefore caused a period of massive growth in the U.S. and adoption of the internet. So a lot of those ideas in the early 2000s were causing him to see all of these new creatives on the internet move into more cities where they could do more work based from home, more work based online, stuff like that. Additionally, rise of Web 2.0, and the last one's kind of just a guess, but radical centrism, because he kind of isn't a part of either party, so maybe that influenced him. And what did his ideals therefore inspire? I listed gentrification and urban regeneration, which not necessarily did they inspire him, but they're definitely closely related to that. Gentrification is the idea that these new buildings and new development is driving out history, driving out preservation, all of these things going down in old cities that we'd like to keep around, and also clearly impacting the economic standpoint of lots of people who are being driven out of those areas. Lastly is criticism and questions. As I was researching this, I found a lot of criticism, a lot of articles and essays trying to prove his theory wrong, just a lot of questions that they had for how relevant, does this idea of the creative class actually benefit economic development, or is it kind of like a loose theory? So some things I did find the creative class, it would mean that public resources are channeled more toward cultural consumption and less toward economic redistribution or the development of local wealth. So that's kind of looking more at the idea of gentrification, where we're putting all this money towards building outdoor malls and parking lots for people to entertain themselves, but we're not putting more money into the city or into the lower income parts of the city, or putting up free housing, stuff like that. Creative economies are often accompanied by rising inequality as well, and they do still rely on inputs from manufacturing industries in the global south, which are very much premised on low wage and precarious work. Although some are lots more are switching to sustainable and fair trade policies, but a lot of them still do rely on or are accompanied by inequality. He also does a lot of whitewashing on the negative externalities, which also points to gentrification, because, like I said, there are people getting kicked out of these areas where these new creative enterprises are coming in, and their voices aren't being heard. So thank you so much for listening. Here are my citations. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit more. Thanks.